On my birthday, my daughter-in-law gave me a wheelchair with a note that said, "Inevitable fate." My son burst into tears laughing. I simply walked out of the house. An hour later, they found out I had canceled every luxury trip and rental I'd been paying for.
Before we continue, comment where you're watching from and subscribe to the channel. We'd love to see how far our stories are reaching.
But let me start from the beginning, because the real story isn't about that wheelchair. It's about how I spent 2 years being slowly erased from my own life, in my own home. I'm Isabella Martinez, and I turned 67 last Tuesday. For the past 2 years, since my husband Robert passed away from cancer, I've been sharing my home with my son Michael, his wife Jessica, and my 8-year-old grandson Tommy. They moved in after Michael lost his job at the marketing firm, and Jessica was between positions. "Just temporarily, Mom," Michael had said, his eyes avoiding mine, "until we get back on our feet." That was 24 months ago. I'd spent the morning of my birthday the same way I always did, making coffee in the kitchen that no longer felt like mine, stepping carefully around Jessica's yoga mat that permanently occupied the living room floor, listening to the sounds of a family that seemed to exist around me rather than with me. The house felt different with them in it, smaller somehow, even though we'd added no furniture, no new rooms. It was as if my presence had been compressed, condensed into the corners they didn't need. Michael had inherited Robert's easy smile and his father's way of making everything seem manageable, even when it wasn't. At 38, he still had that boyish charm that had gotten him out of trouble as a child. Jessica, on the other hand, was all sharp angles and sharper words. She'd been beautiful when they married 10 years ago, the kind of woman who turned heads at restaurants and made other wives feel suddenly ordinary. Now, at 34, she carried herself with the confidence of someone who'd learned that beauty could open doors, but manipulation could keep them open. I'd been preparing for this birthday for weeks, not because I expected anything elaborate, but because birthdays had always been important in our family. Robert used to say that every year you survived was worth celebrating, especially after watching his own father work himself to death at 62. So I'd bought ingredients for Michael's favorite cake, German chocolate, the way my mother used to make it. I'd set the dining room table with the good china, the set Robert and I had received as a wedding gift 43 years ago. Tommy had been excited about Grandma's special day for weeks, drawing me pictures at school and whispering about a super-secret surprise he was planning. That morning, he'd hugged me extra tight before Jessica hurried him off to school, pressing a handmade card into my palm. "Don't open it until tonight, Grandma," he'd whispered conspiratorially. The afternoon stretched ahead of me like every other afternoon for the past 2 years. I cleaned the house that was technically mine, but felt increasingly foreign. I did laundry that included Michael's work clothes and Jessica's expensive activewear, items that cost more than my monthly grocery budget. I prepared dinner for people who ate my food, lived in my home, and somehow made me feel like a guest who'd overstayed her welcome. Around 4 o'clock, Jessica returned from her Pilates class, her blonde hair pulled back in a perfectly messy bun that probably took 20 minutes to achieve. She barely acknowledged me as she swept through the kitchen, grabbing a bottle of kombucha from the refrigerator I still paid to stock. "Michael's picking up Tommy from after-school care," she said without looking at me, scrolling through her phone. "They should be back by 6. "Good," I replied, checking the cake in the oven. "Dinner will be ready by then." She paused in her scrolling, finally glancing up at me. For a moment, I thought she might say something about it being my birthday. Instead, she said, "Oh, we got you something. It's in the garage. Michael will bring it in later." There was something in her tone that made my stomach clench, but I couldn't identify what it was. A hint of amusement, maybe, or anticipation. The way someone sounds when they know something you don't, and they're not entirely sure you're going to like it. At 6:15, Michael's car pulled into the driveway. I heard Tommy's voice before I saw him, chattering excitedly about something that happened at school. The front door opened, and my grandson barreled into the kitchen, his backpack sliding off one shoulder. "Grandma! Grandma! Is it time for your birthday yet?" He launched himself at my legs, wrapping his arms around my waist with the unself-conscious affection that only children possess. "Almost, sweetheart," I said, ruffling his dark hair. Did you have a good day at school? We learned about butterflies, and Marcus brought his hamster for show and tell, and Mrs. Peterson said I could feed the class fish tomorrow because I remembered to raise my hand 3 times in a row. Michael appeared in the doorway, loosening his tie. He looked tired the way he always looked these days. The job hunt had been harder than expected, and though he'd never admit it, I could see the strain wearing on him. The rejection letters that arrived weekly, the interviews that led nowhere, the gradual erosion of confidence that comes from being 38 and starting over. "Happy birthday, Mom," he said, crossing the kitchen to kiss my cheek. His embrace lingered a moment longer than usual, and I wondered if he was feeling the weight of the day too. Birthdays had a way of highlighting absences, and Robert's absence was still a presence in itself, a Robert-shaped hole in every family gathering. "Thank you, honey," I said, squeezing his hand. "How was your day?" "Same as always. But let's not talk about that tonight. This is your day." Jessica appeared behind him, having changed from her workout clothes into a casual dress that probably cost more than my car payment. She'd applied fresh makeup and looked effortlessly put together in that way that actually required considerable effort. "Should we do presents before or after dinner?" she asked, but she was looking at Michael, not me. "Before," Tommy piped up, bouncing on his toes. "I want to see Grandma open mine." Michael and Jessica exchanged a look I couldn't interpret. There was something there, some silent communication that excluded me completely. "Actually," Michael said slowly, "why don't we do our gift first? Then Tommy's, then dinner." My unease deepened. In all the years we'd celebrated birthdays together, we'd never been so formal about the order of gift-giving. Usually, presents appeared when they appeared, opened with laughter and chaos and Tommy's running commentary on everything. "Let me just get it from the garage," Michael said, disappearing back through the house. Jessica busied herself with setting out plates, though I'd already done that earlier. She seemed nervous, which was unusual for her. Jessica Martinez Chen was many things, but nervous wasn't typically one of them. She moved through the world with the confidence of someone who'd learned early that her combination of beauty and determination could get her almost anywhere she wanted to go. I heard the garage door open, then the sound of something being wheeled across the concrete floor. My stomach dropped without my understanding why. Michael reappeared in the kitchen doorway, pushing something I didn't want to see, didn't want to understand. A wheelchair. Not just any wheelchair, but a deluxe model with padded armrests and a small storage basket. It was the kind of thing you'd buy for someone who was going to need it for a long time. Someone who was never getting better. Attached to the handle was a small gift bag with tissue paper spilling out the top. Michael's face was fighting between embarrassment and amusement, settling somewhere in the middle that made him look like a stranger. "Happy birthday, Mom," he said, his voice carrying a forced cheerfulness that made my skin crawl. Tommy looked between the wheelchair and me, his 8-year-old mind trying to process what he was seeing. "Why did you get Grandma a wheelchair, Daddy?" "She's not sick. It's for the future, buddy," Jessica said, her voice bright with artificial enthusiasm. "We wanted to be prepared. Your grandma isn't getting any younger." I stared at the wheelchair, at the gift bag, at my son's face. Everything seemed to move in slow motion, like a movie where the sound doesn't quite match the picture. I reached for the gift bag with hands that didn't feel like my own and pulled out a card. The front of the card showed a peaceful garden scene with the words, "Thinking of you," in flowing script. Inside, in Jessica's sharp handwriting, "Inevitable fate." That was it. 2 words that reduced my entire future to a punchline. Michael started laughing first. Not the warm, inclusive laugh I remembered from his childhood, but something harder. Something that had an edge to it. "Come on, Mom. You have to admit it's practical. We're just thinking ahead." Jessica joined in, her laugh like wind chimes in a storm. Pretty, but cold. The salesperson said it was one of the most comfortable models they had. We went with the deluxe version. I looked at my son, this man I'd raised, whose diapers I'd changed and whose nightmares I'd chased away, and I didn't recognize him. He was laughing at me, at the idea of my future helplessness, at the inevitability of my decline. The laughter continued, echoing in the kitchen that smelled like the birthday cake I'd made for people who thought my aging was entertainment. I set the card down on the counter with steady hands. I looked at Tommy, who was staring at the adults with the confused expression children get when they sense something is wrong but can't identify what it is. I looked at the wheelchair, gleaming silver in the kitchen light. I looked at my son and his wife, still chuckling over their thoughtful gift, and I walked out, not dramatically, not with a slam of the door or a trail of angry words. I simply picked up my purse from the counter, walked through the living room, opened the front door, and left. Behind me, I heard Michael call out, "Mom, Mom, come back. It was just a joke." But I kept walking. I got in my car and sat there for a moment, my hands shaking as I gripped the steering wheel. Through the kitchen window, I could see them inside, Michael gesturing, Jessica shrugging, Tommy looking worried. I started the engine and drove away from the house that had been my home for 25 years, away from the family I'd thought I knew. As I drove through the quiet streets of my neighborhood, past houses where other families were probably sitting down to normal birthday dinners, I made a decision that would change everything. I reached for my phone and dialed the number I'd memorized years ago but never thought I'd need to use in anger. First National Bank customer service line. "This is Patricia speaking. How can I help you today?" "Patricia," I said, my voice steadier than I'd expected. "This is Isabella Martinez. I need to make some changes to my accounts tonight." "Of course, Mrs. Martinez. What kind of changes are we talking about?" I thought about the wheelchair sitting in my kitchen, about Michael's laughter, about Jessica's satisfied smile. "All of them," I said. "I want to change all of them." Patricia from customer service had that patient, professional tone that banking representatives perfect over years of dealing with people's financial crises. But even she seemed surprised by the scope of what I was requesting. "Mrs. Martinez, I want to make sure I understand correctly. You want to remove automatic payments from your checking account for, let me see here, mortgage payment, 3 credit card accounts, 2 car payments, health insurance premiums, and what appears to be a monthly transfer to a savings account in your son's name." I was sitting in my car in the parking lot of Rosemary's Diner, a 24-hour place I'd driven to without thinking. Through the windows, I could see the late dinner crowd, families with tired children, couples sharing pie, people living normal lives where birthday presents didn't come with cruelty attached. "That's correct," I said, my voice sounding strange to my own ears. Calm, decided. "I want all of it stopped immediately." "Ma'am, some of these payments are quite substantial. The mortgage payment alone is $2,800. Are you sure you want to?" "Patricia," I interrupted gently, "I've been making financial decisions for 43 years. I'm sure." There was a pause. I could hear her typing, probably pulling up my account history, seeing the same thing I'd been seeing for 2 years without really understanding what I was looking at. Money flowing out of my accounts like water through a broken dam. My husband's life insurance payout, my retirement savings, the proceeds from selling Robert's business. All of it steadily depleting to support a lifestyle I wasn't living. "I see you've been the primary account holder since 1981, Patricia said carefully. "And these automatic payments have been in place for approximately 24 months. May I ask what's prompted this change?" I almost laughed. "What's prompted this change? How do you explain to a stranger that you've just realized you've been paying for your own humiliation? That you've been financing the very people who see you as nothing more than a walking checkbook with an expiration date?" "Let's just say I've had a change of perspective," I told her. "All right. I do need to warn you that stopping mortgage payments could affect the credit rating of whoever's name is on the property deed. That would be mine," I said. "The house is in my name." Another pause, longer this time. "Oh, I see. Well, that simplifies things legally, though I should mention that if there are other residents in the property, this could create a difficult situation for them." Difficult, that was one way to put it. "Patricia, I appreciate your concern, but I'm quite certain this is what I need to do." It took 45 minutes to unravel 2 years of automatic payments. 45 minutes to discover exactly how much of my life I'd been subsidizing without realizing it. The mortgage payment I knew about. I'd been making it for 25 years. But the rest? The credit cards that Michael and Jessica used for everything from groceries to vacations, the car payments for vehicles I never drove, the health insurance that covered them but somehow never quite covered the specialists I needed for my arthritis. There's also a monthly transfer of $1,500 to Michael Martinez's savings account, Patricia noted. That's been automatic for 24 months as well. $1,500 every month for 2 years. $36,000 that I'd been sending to my son's account without ever asking what it was for, because I'd assumed it was temporary help while he got back on his feet. Help that had become a permanent subsidy for a lifestyle that included Jessica's Pilates classes, Tommy's private tennis lessons, and Michael's expensive suits for interviews that never seemed to pan out. "Stop that too," I said. When we finished, Patricia's tone had shifted from professional concern to something approaching admiration. "Mrs. Martinez, these changes will be effective immediately. Is there anything else I can help you with tonight?" "Actually, yes. I need to change my address for account statements. And I need a new debit card sent to that address." "Of course. What's the new address?" I gave her the address of the Sunset Motor Lodge, the modest hotel on the outskirts of town where Robert and I used to meet for coffee when we were dating 50 years ago. It was still there, still clean and respectable, still the kind of place where you could disappear for a while and think. "I'll also need to change my phone number on the account," I added. After hanging up with Patricia, I sat in my car for another 20 minutes, watching people come and go from the diner. Normal people. People whose children probably didn't give them wheelchairs for their birthdays. My phone had been buzzing steadily with calls from Michael. I'd let them all go to voicemail, but finally, I decided to listen to one. "Mom, come on. You're being ridiculous. It was just a gag gift. We got you real presents too. You're acting like a child. Jessica's making your favorite dinner, and Tommy's been asking where you went. Just come home and we'll forget this whole thing happened. Just come home and we'll forget this whole thing happened." As if the problem was my reaction, not their cruelty. As if I was supposed to smile and pretend that being given a wheelchair with a card that read, "Inevitable Fate," was somehow funny. As if I was supposed to be grateful for the real presents, whatever they were, and ignore the fact that my son and his wife had looked at me and seen nothing but an old woman whose best days were behind her. I deleted the voicemail and drove to the Sunset Motor Lodge. The desk clerk was a woman about my age with kind eyes and gray hair she wasn't trying to hide. Her name tag read, Dorothy. "I need a room," I said. "I'm not sure for how long." "Tough day?" she asked, not nosy, just understanding in the way that people who've lived long enough sometimes are. "You could say that." "Well, you've come to the right place. We specialize in people who need some time to figure things out." She gave me a room on the ground floor with a view of the small garden behind the motel. It wasn't fancy, but it was clean and quiet, and most importantly, it was mine. No one else's yoga mat on the floor. No one else's schedule dictating when I could use the bathroom or kitchen. No one else's laughter echoing through rooms that used to be my sanctuary. I called the front desk and asked Dorothy if there was anywhere I could buy some basic necessities. "There's a Walmart about 5 minutes down the road," she said. "They're open 24 hours. Do you need directions?" "No, I'll find it. Thank you." At Walmart, I bought a small suitcase, enough clothes to last a few days, toiletries, and basic medications. Standing in the checkout line at 10:30 at night, buying a new life in small increments, I realized I felt something I hadn't felt in 2 years: relief. My phone buzzed with a text from Jessica. "Isabella, this is getting out of hand. Michael is beside himself. Whatever we did to offend you, we're sorry. But you're worrying Tommy, and that's not fair." I stared at the message for a long time. Whatever we did to offend you. As if they truly couldn't understand why giving someone a wheelchair for their birthday might be hurtful. As if they genuinely believed the problem was my oversensitivity, not their casual cruelty. I typed back, "I'm fine. I just need some time to think. Don't worry, Tommy. Tell him Grandma is on a little adventure." Back at the motel, I unpacked my few purchases and sat on the bed, finally allowing myself to think about what I'd done. In the space of a few hours, I'd cut off the financial support that had been keeping Michael and Jessica afloat. Tomorrow, they'd wake up to a world where credit cards didn't work, where the mortgage payment wouldn't automatically process, where the comfortable assumption that Mom would handle everything had disappeared. They'd probably think it was a mistake at first, a banking error. They'd call customer service and discover that no, it wasn't an error. Mrs. Martinez had requested all automatic payments be stopped. They'd probably try to call me, and when I didn't answer, they'd drive around looking for me. Let them look. I thought about Tommy, asleep in his bed in the house I'd paid for. dreaming whatever 8-year-olds dream about. He was the innocent in all of this, the one who'd suffer when his parents discovered that their lifestyle was about to change dramatically. That thought made my chest ache, but it also strengthened my resolve. Tommy needed to learn that actions have consequences, that grandmothers aren't inexhaustible resources, that love isn't supposed to come with mockery attached. My phone rang. Michael again. This time I answered. "Mom, where are you?" His voice was tight with panic. "We've been driving around for 2 hours. Your car's not at Aunt Margaret's. It's not at the church." "I'm fine, Michael." "Well, where are you? This is crazy. You left your own birthday dinner? Jessica spent all day cooking your favorites." "Did she now?" I kept my voice level. "Before or after she picked out the wheelchair?" A pause. "Mom, that was." "Look, maybe it wasn't the best gift choice, but we were thinking practically. You're getting older and we wanted to be prepared if something happened." "How thoughtful." "You're not being fair. We were trying to help." Help. That word again. The same word they'd used when they moved into my house. The same word they'd used when I started paying their bills. The same word that had somehow transformed me from mother and homeowner into burden and charity case. "Michael, I want you to listen to me very carefully," I said. "You and Jessica have until the end of this month to figure out how you're going to pay the mortgage, the car payments, and everything else. The automatic payments stopped today." Silence. "What are you talking about?" His voice had gone up an octave. "I'm talking about the fact that I've been supporting your family for 2 years. And apparently, the thanks I get is a wheelchair and a card telling me my deterioration is inevitable. Mom, you can't be serious. I've never been more serious about anything in my life." I hung up. For the first time in 2 years, I slept through the night without waking up to the sound of other people's lives being lived in my house. I woke up Wednesday morning to 17 missed calls. The phone had been buzzing since 6 a.m., but I'd slept so deeply that I didn't hear it until the sunlight streaming through the motel curtains finally pulled me from dreams that, for once, weren't filled with anxiety about other people's problems. 12 calls from Michael, 3 from Jessica, 2 from numbers I didn't recognize. I made coffee using the small machine in my room and sat by the window, looking out at Dorothy's garden while I listened to the voicemails in chronological order. It was like watching a panic unfold in real time. Michael, 6:23 a.m. "Mom, I don't know if you're screening my calls or what, but we need to talk. Something's wrong with the bank accounts. Call me back." Jessica, 7:15 a.m. "Isabella, I don't know what game you think you're playing, but this isn't funny anymore. Michael's credit card was declined at the grocery store this morning. Fix this." Michael, 7:45 a.m. "Mom, please. I just called First National and they said you canceled all the automatic payments. This has to be a mistake. Call me back right now." The progression was fascinating in a clinical way. Confusion giving way to panic, panic giving way to anger, anger giving way to something that sounded almost like desperation. By the 9th voicemail, Jessica had dropped all pretense of politeness. "Isabella, whatever midlife crisis you think you're having, you need to snap out of it. We have responsibilities. Tommy has school, I have appointments, Michael has interviews lined up. You can't just pull the rug out from under us because you got your feelings hurt over a stupid joke." A stupid joke. That's what they were calling it now. I deleted all the voicemails without responding and decided to venture out for a proper breakfast. Dorothy had mentioned a family-owned restaurant called Bernie's just down the street, the kind of place that served real coffee and didn't rush you through your meal. Bernie's turned out to be exactly what I needed: worn vinyl booths, waitresses who called everyone honey, and a menu that hadn't changed since 1987. I ordered eggs over easy, wheat toast, and coffee that actually tasted like coffee instead of the designer blends Jessica insisted on buying with my money. The waitress, whose name tag read Carla, looked to be in her 50s with laugh lines around her eyes and the efficient grace of someone who'd been doing this job for decades. "You passing through or staying a while?" she asked as she refilled my coffee cup. "Staying," I said, "at least for now." "Well, you picked a good place for it. This town's got a way of letting people be themselves without too much fuss." I was halfway through my eggs when my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Mrs. Martinez, this is Tommy's teacher, Mrs. Peterson. Michael asked me to reach out. Tommy seems upset today and mentioned something about Grandma going on an adventure. I wanted to make sure everything is okay." My heart clenched. Of all the consequences of my actions, Tommy's confusion and worry was the hardest to bear. He was 8 years old, innocent of his parents' cruelty, caught in the middle of something he couldn't possibly understand. I typed back, "Thank you for reaching out. Tommy's right. Grandma is on a little adventure, but I'm perfectly safe and well. Please reassure him that this has nothing to do with him and that I love him very much." Mrs. Peterson responded quickly, "Of course. He's a special little boy. Take care of yourself." I finished breakfast and decided to take a walk through downtown. I'd lived in this city for 43 years, but realized I'd never really explored it beyond the efficient routes between home, work, grocery store, and church. When you're busy raising children and supporting other people's lives, you don't have much time for wandering. The downtown area had that carefully maintained charm that smaller cities cultivate: antique shops, a used bookstore, a yarn shop with a hand-painted sign, a coffee house where college students hunched over laptops. I found myself stopping at a shop called Second Chances, which advertised estate jewelry and vintage clothing. The owner was a woman about my age with silver hair braided down her back and multiple rings on each finger. Her name was Ruth, and she had the kind of energy that suggested she'd lived several interesting lives and wasn't done yet. "Looking for anything particular?" she asked as I browsed through necklaces displayed in an old jewelry case. "Just looking," I said, then found myself adding, "I'm having something of a life change." Ruth smiled. "Those can be expensive or liberating, depending on how you handle them. I'm hoping for liberating." Good choice. Can be scary as hell, but usually worth it in the end. I ended up buying a silver bracelet with small turquoise stones, nothing expensive or dramatic, just something that was mine, chosen by me, paid for with my money for no reason other than I liked it. Walking back toward the motel, I felt my phone vibrating again. This time it was a call from Jessica, and something in me decided it was time to stop avoiding the conversation. "Isabella, thank God," she said as soon as I answered. "Where are you? We need to figure this out." "Good morning, Jessica. I'm fine. Thank you for asking. Don't be sarcastic. Do you have any idea what kind of position you've put us in? The mortgage payment was supposed to process today. Michael's car payment bounced. My gym membership was canceled. What were you thinking?" What was I thinking? I was thinking about a wheelchair with a card that read, "Inevitable fate." I was thinking about 2 years of being treated like a burden in my own home. I was thinking about $36,000 in direct transfers that I'd apparently been making without realizing how it looked from the outside, like an old woman being systematically drained by family members who saw her as nothing more than a source of funds. "I was thinking that perhaps it's time you and Michael learned to pay your own bills," I said calmly. "Are you insane? We can't afford this house on Michael's unemployment. We can't afford the cars, the insurance, Tommy's school. We moved in with you because we needed help, and I helped. For 2 years I helped. I paid for everything while you treated me like an inconvenience. We never. That's not. Isabella, you're taking this birthday thing way too seriously. So the gift was a little tacky. We'll return it. We'll get you something nice. Can we please just go back to normal?" Normal. There was that word again. They're normal, where I paid for everything and asked for nothing in return except basic human decency, which apparently was too much to expect. "Jessica, what did you and Michael think was going to happen? Did you think I was going to support your family indefinitely? Did you think I was just going to quietly fade away while you planned my future as an invalid? We weren't planning your future as anything. We were just being practical. You're 67 years old, Isabella. Things happen. We wanted to be prepared. By buying me a wheelchair and laughing about it." A long pause. Michael laughed because he was uncomfortable. He didn't know how you'd react to the gift. "How did you think I'd react?" Another pause. Longer this time. "We thought you'd see it as us caring about your future. By assuming I have no future except decline and dependence. That's not what we meant." "Then what did you mean, Jessica? Explain to me how a wheelchair with a card about inevitable fate was supposed to make me feel cared for." Silence. "Look," she said finally, her voice taking on the tone she used when she was trying to manage a situation. "Maybe we could have handled it better, but you're overreacting. You can't just cut us off financially because you didn't like a birthday present. Watch me. Isabella, be reasonable. We have a child to think about. Tommy needs stability. He needs his school, his friends, his routine. You can't just disrupt his whole life because you're having some kind of emotional breakdown. Emotional breakdown. That's what they were calling my decision to stop funding their lifestyle. Tommy will be fine, I said. Children are more resilient than adults give them credit for, and maybe it will be good for him to learn that actions have consequences. What's that supposed to mean? It means that maybe Tommy should understand that when you treat people badly, especially people who love you and support you, those people might decide they don't want to be treated badly anymore. We don't treat you badly. I laughed, and it came out harsher than I intended. Jessica, yesterday you gave me a wheelchair for my birthday. Today you called my reaction an emotional breakdown. If that's your idea of treating someone well, I'd hate to see what you consider cruel. Fine. You want an apology? I'm sorry. We're sorry. The wheelchair was a stupid idea. There. Are you happy? An apology offered like a bone thrown to a difficult dog. An apology that came only after the money was cut off. An apology that still blamed me for overreacting rather than acknowledging the genuine cruelty of their actions. No, Jessica, I'm not happy. I'm disappointed. I'm sad. I'm angry. But I'm also, for the first time in 2 years, making my own decisions about my own life. So what happens now? You're just going to abandon your family? I'm not abandoning anyone. I'm simply no longer going to pay for people who think my aging is a punchline. Isabella. I have to go, Jessica. I hope you and Michael figure out how to support your own family, because I won't be doing it anymore. I hung up before she could respond. Standing outside the yarn shop where I'd paused during my walk, I realized I was shaking, not from fear or anxiety, but from something that felt almost like exhilaration. For the first time in 2 years, I'd stood up for myself without apologizing for it afterward. My phone immediately started ringing again. Michael this time. I let it go to voicemail. The afternoon sun was warm on my face as I walked back toward the motel. I passed families heading to after-school activities, older couples walking dogs, teenagers clustered around the coffee shop, normal people living normal lives where birthday presents were expressions of love, not cruelty wrapped in practicality. Tomorrow, Michael and Jessica would have to face their first day of actually paying for their own choices. Tomorrow, they'd have to figure out how to manage their lives without my money cushioning every decision. And tomorrow, I'd wake up in my small motel room, make my own coffee, and decide what I wanted to do with a day that belonged entirely to me. For the first time in years, I was looking forward to tomorrow. They found me Thursday evening. I was sitting in the motel's small garden area, reading a book I'd bought at the used bookstore downtown, something I hadn't done for pleasure in months. The simple act of choosing my own entertainment, of sitting quietly without someone needing something from me, felt like a luxury I'd forgotten existed. I heard the car doors slam before I saw them. Michael and Jessica emerged from Michael's Honda like people arriving at a crime scene. Urgent, angry, and barely containing themselves. They'd probably driven around town for hours looking for me, checking every parking lot and restaurant until they spotted my car at the Sunset Motor Lodge. Michael saw me first. Even from across the parking lot, I could see the strain in his face. He looked like he'd aged 5 years in 3 days. Jessica walked behind him, her expression set in the kind of righteous anger that comes from believing you're the wronged party. Mom. Michael's voice carried across the evening air, tight with a mixture of relief and frustration. We need to talk. I closed my book and looked at them, really looked at them. Michael in his wrinkled button-down shirt and khakis that needed pressing. Jessica in yoga pants and an oversized sweater, her hair pulled back in a messy bun that looked more frazzled than stylish. They looked like people under pressure, people whose comfortable assumptions about life had been suddenly challenged. Hello, Michael, Jessica. I kept my voice level, neither welcoming nor hostile. They approached my small patio table like diplomats entering a negotiation they weren't sure they could win. Jessica remained standing, her arms crossed, while Michael sat down across from me with the careful movements of someone trying not to provoke an argument. Mom, this has gone far enough, Michael said. We get it. You're upset about the birthday thing. We're sorry, but you can't just disappear and leave us hanging like this. I didn't disappear. I told you where I was staying. At a motel, Jessica said, her voice sharp with disbelief. You're living at a motel instead of in your own home because of what? Because you didn't like a present? I studied her face, looking for any sign that she understood what they'd done, any indication that she grasped why receiving a wheelchair with a card about inevitable fate might have been deeply hurtful. I found nothing but irritation and confusion. "Jessica, sit down," I said quietly. "If we're going to have this conversation, let's have it properly." She hesitated, then pulled out the chair next to Michael with more force than necessary. "Fine, let's talk. Let's talk about how you've thrown a tantrum that's affecting an innocent child. Tommy came home from school crying yesterday because some kid told him his grandmother ran away from home." The mention of Tommy hit exactly where it was intended to. I felt the familiar stab of guilt, the automatic response of a grandmother who'd spent 8 years putting that child's needs above almost everything else. "How is Tommy?" I asked. "He's confused and scared," Michael said, leaning forward. "He doesn't understand why Grandma left without saying goodbye. He keeps asking if he did something wrong." "And what did you tell him?" Michael and Jessica exchanged a glance. "We told him that Grandma needed some time alone, but that she'd be back soon," Jessica said. "And that's what you believe? That I'll be back soon?" "Of course that's what we believe," Michael said. "You're not actually going to abandon your family over this." Abandon. That word again. As if my refusal to continue financing their lifestyle constituted abandonment rather than self-preservation. "Michael, what exactly do you think I'm abandoning?" "Your responsibilities, your family, your home." "My responsibilities," I repeated. "Which responsibilities are those?" "Taking care of us," he said, as if it were obvious. "We moved in because we needed help. You agreed to help us. I agreed to help you temporarily while you got back on your feet. That was 2 years ago. The economy's been tough. The economy's been tough for everyone. But somehow, Jessica's Pilates classes and Tommy's tennis lessons and your expensive suits for job interviews that never seem to pan out, none of those things seem to suffer because of the tough economy." Jessica's face flushed. "Those things are necessary. I need to stay healthy. Tommy needs activities. Michael needs to look professional. And I needed to be treated with basic respect in my own home." "We always treated you with respect," Michael said. I reached into my purse and pulled out my phone. Over the past few days, I'd been thinking about this moment, knowing it would come. I'd prepared for it in the same methodical way I used to prepare for difficult conversations with clients when I worked in accounting years ago. "I want to play something for you," I said. "Mom, what are you?" I held up my hand and pressed play on a voice recording. Jessica's voice filled the evening air, crystal clear. "I swear to God, your mother is driving me insane. She acts like she owns the place." "She does own the place," came Michael's voice. Jessica's laugh. "You know what I mean. She's always hovering, always commenting on how we do things. Yesterday, she suggested I might want to use less expensive shampoo. Can you believe that? Like she's doing us some huge favor by letting us live here." "She is doing us a huge favor. Michael, wake up. She loves having us here. It gives her something to do, someone to take care of. Without us, she'd just be some lonely old woman with nothing but soap operas and doctor's appointments." The recording continued for another minute, Jessica complaining about my interference in her parenting, my outdated ideas about household management, my passive-aggressive comments about their spending habits, Michael occasionally defending me, but more often just listening or offering non-committal responses. I stopped the playback and looked at their faces. Michael had gone pale. Jessica looked like she'd been caught stealing. "Where did you get that?" Jessica asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I recorded it in my own home, on my own phone. Perfectly legal." I put the phone back in my purse. "I have 17 similar recordings from the past 6 months. Would you like to hear more?" "You were spying on us?" "I was documenting my life." "Amazing what you hear when people think you're just some lonely old woman who's grateful for the company." Michael found his voice. "Mom, those conversations, they don't represent how we really feel about you, don't they? Because they sound exactly like how you really feel about me. Like I'm a convenient source of money and housing who should be grateful that you're willing to tolerate my presence." "That's not true," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Then explain the wheelchair, Michael. Explain how 2 people who respect and care about me thought it would be funny to give me a wheelchair with a card about my inevitable fate." Jessica straightened in her chair, some of her defiance returning. "We explained that. We were thinking practically. We were trying to be prepared. For what? My imminent collapse? My transformation into the helpless invalid you apparently think I'm destined to become? People your age face certain realities. People my age." I let the phrase hang in the air. "Jessica, I'm 67. not 97. I work out 3 times a week. I drive, I cook, I manage my own finances. Or at least I did until I started managing yours too. The only thing that makes me feel old is being treated like I'm already dead. Nobody treats you like you're dead, Michael protested. Really? When was the last time either of you asked my opinion about anything important? When was the last time you included me in a decision about the house I pay for? When was the last time you acted like I was a person with thoughts and feelings, rather than just a resource to be managed? They were quiet. Around us, the motel's evening sounds continued. Doors closing, cars starting, people going about their lives. Normal people with normal problems. Look, Michael said finally, maybe we could have handled some things better. But Mom, you can't just cut us off completely. We have nowhere else to go. You have jobs, you have skills, you have 2 functioning adults worth of capability. Michael's been looking for work for months, Jessica said. It's not that easy. Then maybe it's time to look harder. Maybe it's time to consider jobs that aren't perfect but pay the bills. Maybe it's time to realize that life doesn't owe you the exact career you want, at the exact salary you need to maintain the lifestyle you prefer. So what are you saying? Michael's voice was getting tighter. That you're never coming home? That you're just going to abandon Tommy and leave us to figure everything out on our own? I'm saying that I'm done being taken for granted. I'm done being treated like my only value is in what I can provide financially. I'm done living in my own home like a tolerated guest. Jessica leaned forward, her expression shifting to something that looked almost like desperation. Isabella, please. We need you. Tommy needs you. We can't do this without you. It was the first time she'd admitted they needed me, but even now, it was about what I could do for them, not about who I was as a person. You're going to have to learn, I said gently. And if we can't? I looked at my son, this man I'd raised, whose scraped knees I'd bandaged and whose dreams I'd supported even when I couldn't afford to. I saw the little boy who used to tell me he'd take care of me when I got old, back when we both assumed that would mean love and respect, not wheelchairs and casual cruelty. Then you'll have learned something important about the consequences of taking people for granted. Michael's face crumpled slightly. Mom, I'm sorry. We're both sorry. Can't we go back to the way things were? No, I said, and the word came out stronger than I'd expected. We can't, because the way things were wasn't working for me. The way things were was slowly killing the person I used to be. They left 20 minutes later after more pleading, more promises to do better, more assurances that they'd never meant to hurt me, but they still didn't understand what they'd done wrong. They understood that their money had been cut off. They understood that I was angry, but they didn't understand why. As I watched their car pull out of the motel parking lot, I felt something I hadn't expected. Relief mixed with sadness. I was sad for the relationships we'd damaged, sad for the grandson who was caught in the middle, sad for the family we might have been if they'd learned to see me as a person rather than a provider. But I was also relieved. For the first time in 2 years, I'd stood up for myself completely, without apologizing or backing down. For the first time in 2 years, I'd chosen my own dignity over their comfort. It felt like the beginning of something, though I wasn't sure what yet. Friday morning brought news I wasn't expecting. I was having coffee in the motel's small breakfast area when Dorothy approached my table with a concerned expression and the local newspaper folded under her arm. Isabella, honey, I don't know if this is any of my business, but I thought you should see this. She unfolded the paper to the real estate section and pointed to a listing that made my coffee turn cold in my mouth. Charming family home, must sell quickly, 1247 Maple Drive. My house, my home of 25 years, listed for sale without my knowledge or consent. The address matched what you put on your registration form, Dorothy said gently. I figured it might be connected to whatever brought you here. I stared at the listing, at the professional photos that made my living room look like it belonged to strangers. The furniture was arranged differently than I'd left it. Personal photos had been removed. Even my reading chair had been repositioned to look more staged and less lived in. The listing price was $340,000, about $60,000 more than the house was worth, suggesting either desperation or delusion on Michael and Jessica's part. Thank you for showing me this, I managed to say. Dorothy squeezed my shoulder. You want some company while you figure out your next move? I make a mean second cup of coffee, and I've seen enough of life to know when someone needs a friendly ear. An hour later, I was sitting in Dorothy's small office behind the front desk, learning that she'd been divorced twice, raised 3 children as a single mother, and spent the last 15 years running the motel after buying it from the original owners. "So let me get this straight," she said, refilling our coffee cups. "They're trying to sell your house, the house that's in your name, the house you still own, apparently. Can they do that legally? No, but they can list it and waste a lot of people's time, and they can create a mess that will take lawyers to untangle." Dorothy shook her head. "Some people's children, I swear. My youngest pulled something similar when his father died. Tried to sell my car while I was at the funeral. Said he figured I'd be too grief-stricken to drive. These kids today think they can just take over because we're getting older." "What did you do?" "Reported the car stolen and had him arrested." She grinned. Amazing how quickly his concern for my grief-stricken state disappeared when he was sitting in a jail cell. I almost laughed despite everything. I don't think I'm quite ready for that approach. Maybe not. But honey, you need to do something. They're banking on you being too tired or too guilt-ridden to fight back. She was right, and we both knew it. Michael and Jessica were counting on my love for Tommy, my natural inclination to avoid conflict, my decades of putting family harmony above my own needs. They were betting that eventually I'd cave in and come home, resume the payments, and pretend the wheelchair incident never happened. "I need to call my lawyer," I said. "You have a lawyer?" "I have Robert's lawyer. Same thing. James Fitzgerald had handled Robert's estate after he died, and he'd been patient with my questions about wills and inheritance and property rights. He was old-school professional, the kind of man who still wore suspenders and kept hard copies of everything, but his legal advice had always been sound. "Mrs. Martinez," he said when I reached him that afternoon, "I'm glad you called. I had a rather interesting conversation with a real estate agent this morning." "About my house?" "Indeed. A woman named Patricia Chen called to verify some information about the property listing. When I told her that the property was solely in your name and that I had no knowledge of any intent to sell, she became quite concerned." "What did you tell her?" "I told her the truth, that as far as I knew, you had no intention of selling, and that anyone representing themselves as authorized to sell property they don't own could face serious legal consequences." I felt a small flutter of satisfaction. "What happens now?" "Well, Ms. Chen was quite professional about it. She said she'd contact the listing agent immediately to clarify the situation. She also mentioned that she'd be documenting everything in case there are questions later about fraudulent listings. Could Michael and Jessica get in legal trouble for this? Potentially. Listing property you don't own with intent to sell could be considered fraud, depending on the circumstances and their intentions. But Mrs. Martinez, I think we need to discuss a more immediate concern, which is, your son called my office yesterday. He was agitated. He claimed that you'd had some kind of mental breakdown and that the family was concerned about your ability to make sound financial decisions. He asked about the process for having someone declared mentally incompetent. The words hit me like a physical blow. Mental breakdown, mentally incompetent. They were trying to have me declared incapable of managing my own affairs because I'd stopped paying their bills. "Can they do that?" I asked, my voice smaller than I intended. "It's not easy, and it requires substantial evidence of actual incapacity. But Mrs. Martinez, the fact that they're even exploring this option tells me we need to be proactive about protecting your interests. What do you recommend?" "Several things. First, I want to document your mental competency clearly. Medical evaluation, cognitive testing, the works. Second, I think we should consider filing for a restraining order to prevent any further attempts to interfere with your property or finances. Third, and most importantly, I think you should come in so we can review and update all your legal documents." "Update them how?" "Power of attorney will, beneficiary designations, property deeds, anything that could potentially be challenged or misinterpreted. I want to make sure your wishes are crystal clear and legally bulletproof." I made an appointment for Monday morning and spent the weekend in a strange state of alternating calm and anxiety. Calm because I was finally taking concrete steps to protect myself. Anxious because I was realizing just how far Michael and Jessica were willing to go to maintain their lifestyle. Saturday evening, I was reading in my room when my phone rang. Tommy's voice was small and scared. "Grandma?" Mommy gave me her phone to call you. Hi, sweetheart. How are you doing? I'm okay. But Grandma, are you ever coming home? Mommy and Daddy keep whispering about grown-up stuff, and they seem really worried. My heart broke a little more. Tommy, can you keep a secret? Uh-huh. Grandma's not sick or hurt or anything bad like that. But sometimes grown-ups have disagreements about important things, and sometimes it takes a while to work them out. Like when me and Marcus had that fight about the baseball cards. Something like that, yes. But just like you and Marcus figured things out, we'll figure this out too. Will you come to my soccer game next Saturday? Coach says I might get to play goalie. I closed my eyes. Tommy's soccer games had been one of my greatest joys. Sitting on the sidelines with other grandparents, cheering for an 8-year-old who played with more enthusiasm than skill. I don't know yet, sweetheart, but I want you to know that whether I'm there or not, I'm always proud of you. Okay? Grandma? Yes? I love you. I love you too, Tommy. More than you know. After he hung up, I sat in the gathering darkness of my motel room and let myself cry. Not the angry tears I'd shed earlier in the week, but the deep, grief-filled tears of someone who's lost something precious and isn't sure how to get it back. Sunday morning, Dorothy knocked on my door with fresh coffee and what she called her meddling face on. I've been thinking about your situation all night, she said, settling into the room's single chair. And I have an idea that might sound crazy, but hear me out. I'm listening. What if you don't go back? What do you mean? I mean, what if instead of trying to fix things with Michael and Jessica, you just start over? What if you sell the house yourself, take the money, and build a life that's actually yours? The suggestion was so simple and so radical that I couldn't immediately process it. Go back had always been the assumption. Fix things, reconcile, find a way to make it work. Those had been the only options I'd considered. I couldn't do that to Tommy, I said. Honey, staying in a bad situation doesn't help Tommy. It teaches him that love means accepting mistreatment, that family means sacrificing yourself for people who don't appreciate the sacrifice. Is that really what you want him to learn? I thought about Tommy's phone call, about his confusion and worry, about the soccer games I might miss. But I also thought about the recordings on my phone, about Jessica's casual cruelty, about Michael's laughter at my expense. Where would I go? Dorothy smiled. Anywhere you want. That's the beautiful thing about starting over at our age. We finally get to choose what matters to us. That night, I called James Fitzgerald at his home number. Mrs. Martinez, is everything all right? James, I want to sell my house. I want to sell it myself, properly and legally. Can you help me with that? There was a pause. Of course I can. But are you certain this is what you want to do? I looked around my small motel room, at the life I'd been building one day at a time for the past week. A life without constant anxiety about other people's needs. A life where my birthday presents didn't come with cruel jokes attached. A life where I could read a book without being interrupted or make coffee without having to navigate around someone else's yoga mat. Yes, I said. I'm certain. I want to start over. Well then, James said, and I could hear the approval in his voice. Let's give you that fresh start. For the first time since my birthday, I felt something that might have been hope. 6 months later, I was standing in the office of Martinez Cleaning Solutions, watching my newest employee mop the floor with the careful attention of someone who'd never done manual labor before in his life. Michael looked up from the industrial bucket he was wrestling with, his expensive interview suit replaced by the company uniform, navy blue polo shirt with Martinez Cleaning embroidered on the pocket. His hands, which had once been soft from years of unemployment cushioned by my money, now bore the small calluses that come from honest work. Mom, this mop bucket is heavier than it looks, he said, attempting a smile that didn't quite mask his exhaustion. Most things are harder than they look when you're actually doing them yourself, I replied, checking items off my daily inventory list. How are you finding the work? It's humbling. That was one word for it. 6 months ago, Michael Martinez had been a man who thought himself above manual labor, who spent his days in coffee shops, networking, and his evenings complaining about employers who couldn't recognize his potential. Now he was learning that there was dignity in work that left you tired, in earning money that came from your own effort rather than someone else's generosity. The business had been my idea. born during those first weeks at the motel when Dorothy and I had talked late into the night about second chances and the courage to rebuild. "You know what this town needs?" she'd said one evening as we watched the sunset from the motel garden. "A cleaning service run by people who actually care about doing good work." She'd been right, as usual. Within 3 months of selling the house on Maple Drive, I'd purchased a small commercial space, bought equipment, and hired my first employees, women like me who'd been underestimated, overlooked, or written off because of their age. Maria, 63, who'd been laid off from her factory job after 30 years. Patricia, 58, whose husband had left her for a younger woman and whose children thought she should just accept charity rather than work. Ruth from the antique store, who needed extra income but wanted flexible hours. We were good at what we did. We understood that cleaning wasn't just about making things look presentable. It was about creating spaces where people could feel comfortable, safe, productive. We took pride in our work because we knew its value, both to our clients and to ourselves. The irony that Michael was now my employee wasn't lost on either of us. When he'd shown up at my office 2 months ago, thin and desperate after losing the apartment he'd moved into when the house was sold, I'd almost turned him away. Jessica had left him, taking Tommy to live with her parents in another state, claiming that Michael was unstable and unable to provide proper support. "I need a job, Mom," he'd said, standing in my office doorway like a stranger asking for charity. "Any job. I'll do anything." I'd looked at him, really looked at him, and seen something I hadn't seen in years: humility. The arrogance that had allowed him to laugh at my birthday wheelchair was gone, replaced by the hollow-eyed exhaustion of someone who'd finally learned that actions have consequences. "The starting position is cleaning crew," I'd told him. "Minimum wage, no special treatment because you're my son. You'll work the same hours, follow the same rules, earn your way up just like everyone else." "I understand." "Do you? Because this isn't temporary help until you find something better. This is a real job that requires real work. If you think you're too good for it, you can leave now." He'd shaken his head. "I'm not too good for anything anymore." And he'd been true to his word. Michael showed up on time, did what he was asked, and slowly earned the respect of his coworkers. Not because he was the boss's son, but because he worked hard and didn't complain. The transformation had been painful to watch sometimes, like watching someone shed a skin that had protected them for years, but ultimately held them back. "Isabella?" Patricia appeared in the office doorway, clipboard in hand. "The Henderson account called. They want to add weekly window service to their contract." "Excellent. Add it to the schedule." I turned back to Michael, who was now attempting to master the art of wringing a mop without soaking his shoes. "How's the apartment working out?" He'd rented a studio apartment in the same complex where Maria lived. Modest, clean, affordable on a cleaner's salary. No room for visitors, no space for anyone's yoga mat but his own. "It's quiet," he said. "I like the quiet." I understood that. After years of chaos, of other people's drama filling every corner of his life, Michael was learning the peace that comes from simplicity, from earning your own way and asking nothing from anyone. "Have you heard from Tommy?" I asked. His face tightened slightly. This was still the hardest part for both of us. The grandson we both loved, caught in the middle of his parents' collapsed marriage and his grandmother's newfound independence. "Jessica lets me video call him twice a week," Michael said. "He asks about you every time." "What do you tell him?" "That his grandmother is the strongest person I know. That she built something amazing from nothing. That maybe someday, when he's older, he'll understand why sometimes people have to choose their own dignity over other people's comfort." I felt my throat tighten. Those were almost the exact words I'd used when trying to explain to Dorothy why I couldn't just forgive and go back to the way things were. "He starts Little League next month," Michael continued. "Jessica sent me the schedule. He's playing shortstop. Tommy would be 9 now, a year older and probably taller, learning to navigate a world where his father worked as a janitor and his grandmother owned the company. A world where families didn't always look the way children expected them to. "Does he seem happy?" I asked. "He misses us, both of us, but Jessica's parents are good to him, and he's making new friends at school." Michael paused in his mopping. "Mom, I know I don't have the right to ask you for anything anymore, but..." "What? If Jessica ever lets him visit, would you? Would you want to see him?" The question hit me in the chest like a physical blow. 6 months of carefully constructed independence, of learning to live for myself, of building a life where I mattered. And still, the mention of my grandson could reduce me to the grandmother who'd do anything for his smile. "Yes," I said quietly. "Of course I'd want to see him." Michael nodded and returned to his mopping. We worked in comfortable silence for a few minutes, the office filled with the familiar sounds of a business in motion, phones ringing, employees checking in, the distant hum of vacuum cleaners from other parts of the building. "Mom?" Michael's voice was different now, softer. "Yes? I know I can never really make up for what we did to you. The wheelchair, the way we treated you, all of it. But I want you to know that working here, seeing what you built, I'm proud of you. I'm proud to be your son, even if I don't deserve to be." I set down my clipboard and really looked at him. This man who'd once laughed at the idea of my inevitable decline, who'd sat in my house spending my money while discussing how much easier life would be when I was gone. He looked older now, worn by the kind of experience that teaches hard lessons. But there was something in his eyes that reminded me of the little boy he'd been, the child who'd once promised to take care of me when I got old. "Michael," I said, "you're here. You're working. You're learning. That's enough for now." He smiled, and for the first time in months, it looked genuine. The afternoon brought its usual rhythm of clients and schedules and small crises that needed solving. Mrs. Henderson's windows, a new client requesting an estimate, Maria needing to leave early for a doctor's appointment. The normal problems of a normal business run by normal people doing important work. Around 5 o'clock, as I was locking up for the day, Dorothy appeared at the front door with 2 cups of coffee and the grin she wore when she had news to share. "Guess what I heard at the post office?" she said, settling into one of the chairs in my office. I'm almost afraid to ask. Jessica's engaged to some lawyer in Phoenix. Word is they're planning a big wedding this summer. I waited to feel something: jealousy, sadness, regret. Instead, I felt a kind of distant curiosity, as if Dorothy were telling me about strangers whose drama had nothing to do with my life. "Good for her," I said, and meant it. "I hope she's learned to treat people better. But, from what I hear, this new guy's got plenty of his own money, so she won't need to depend on anyone else's generosity." We both laughed at that, the kind of laughter that comes from having survived something difficult and found yourself stronger on the other side. "Any regrets?" Dorothy asked. I thought about the question seriously. Did I regret the 2 years of financial support? The attempts to keep the family together? The birthday dinner that had ended with a wheelchair and my world falling apart? "No," I said finally. "I regret that it took me so long to stand up for myself. I regret that Tommy got hurt in the process, but I don't regret choosing my own dignity." "And Michael?" I looked through the office window to where Michael was loading equipment into one of the company vans, getting ready for an evening commercial job. His movements were efficient now, practiced. He'd learned to take pride in work well done. Michael's learning that respect isn't something you inherit or demand. It's something you earn through how you treat other people. I smiled. It's taken him 38 years to figure that out, but better late than never. Dorothy raised her coffee cup in a toast. To second chances. To second chances, I agreed. Later that evening, alone in my small apartment above Ruth's antique store, the perfect size for one person who'd learned the difference between solitude and loneliness, I pulled out my phone and scrolled through the photos Tommy had sent through Michael. Pictures of his new school, his little league uniform, a drawing he'd made of our family that included a grandmother who owned the best cleaning company in the world. I wasn't the same woman who'd received a wheelchair for her birthday 6 months ago. That woman had been tired, diminished, slowly disappearing into other people's expectations. This woman owned a successful business, employed people who depended on her, made decisions based on her own judgment rather than other people's comfort. I wasn't someone's inevitable fate anymore. I was Isabella Martinez, CEO, employer, woman who'd learned that it's never too late to choose yourself. And if that wasn't worth celebrating, I didn't know what was.